Top 10 Talmud, Part 6. The Talmud in Brachos deals with blessings and prayer. In Tractate Berakhot, page 17a, Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, Rabbi Alexandri, Basar de Matzle Amar Hachi. After he would pray, Rabbi Alexandri would say the following: Ribon ha'olamim, Master of the universe, Galui bi'adul lefanecha, sheritzonenu la'asos ritzonecha. It is known before you that we want to do your will, that our will is to do your will. Umi ma'akev, and what stops us from following God's will? Se'or shebe'isa, the leaven in the dough, v'shibud malchios, and the subjugation to the nations of the world. Being in the diaspora, they stop us from serving you, God. What does the Talmud mean when it says that what stops us from serving God is the se'or shebe'isa, the leaven in the dough? What does this mean? This means the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. Each of us is born good. We are born tahor, pure. Every neshama comes into the world, every person comes into the world, Jew or non-Jew, comes in with a soul, and that soul is pure and good, healthy and ready to serve God. The soul is confronted by two inclinations, the Yetzer Hatov and the Yetzer Hara, the good inclination and the negative inclination. We have a body and we have emotions and we have an ego and an id. We have appetites and lusts and passions and desires and needs, and those are considered to be the negative inclination. And we have a seichel eloki, a higher intellect, a higher godly intellect in the neshama, in the soul, which is called the Yetzer Hatov, the good inclination. So here we are in the middle. We are a good neshama, a healthy soul. And on this side, on our left shoulder, we have a little red angel with a pitchfork in its hand, which is a negative inclination, saying, go for it. And we have a beautiful little angelic white angel on our right side, on our shoulder, saying, don't do that. Be a good boy. Follow the will of God. These two protagonists, the little red angel with a pitchfork and a tail on the left side, the evil inclination, and on our other side, the beautiful white angel, the good side of ourselves, they battle with each other and try to influence us in the middle, the soul. The soul is the choosing center, the spiritual center, to make its choice. What is the soul? The soul is an extension of God. It's an expression of God. It's a spark of God. It's a mirror image of God. And he places that part of himself in each of us, and that is intrinsically valuable, worthy, and good. And then we have dimensions of ourselves which are vying for our choice. The soul, the Tselem Elokim, the image of God, is the power of choice. The Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim, the guide for the perplexed, in chapter 1, part 25, says that the Tselem Elokim, the image of God, is free will. It's also said by the Meshech Chochmah, and he explains that the Tselem Elokim, the image of God, the potential of godliness within ourselves, is the free will. God is the source of all free will. He is completely autonomous and can do whatever he wishes. We have within us the power to follow his will. That little white angel says, follow God's will. And we have the little red angel with a pitchfork, which asks us to not follow God's will. Both these malachim, both of these angels, the good inclination and the negative inclination, are sent by God. God forbid, there is no such thing as an anti-God, an angel which goes against God. The negative inclination, the red angel with the pitchfork and the tail, was sent by God to allow us to have free will. It has to be balanced. So the negative inclination, the animal part of ourselves, the lusts, the emotions, the passions, and the good inclination, the soul, the positivity, the good character traits, have to fight it out between each other and present their arguments to us, to the soul, to the essence of self, to make its choice. That's what we are. We are a bundle of choices. The Rambam tells us the image of God within us is the Tselem Elokim, the potential to choose good. And we have to choose between the left side and the right side. But they're both sent by God. and they're both sent to test us to see what we will choose. Why is the negative inclination, the red guy with a pitchfork and a tail, why is he called Se'or Shebe'isa? Why is he called the leaven in the dough? Why is the negative inclination referred to as leaven in the dough? The basic ingredients of matzah are flour and water. If you put yeast in the matzah, it will rise. After the 10th plague of Makas Bechoros, when the firstborn Egyptians died, they quickly had to move and leave Egypt quickly and did not have time to put yeast in their dough, in their flour and water. So the bread did not rise. It was flat. It was a matzah. And we commemorate and relive and re-experience that experience of freedom by leaving Egypt quickly, for having matzah for 8 days during Passover. 8 days in the diaspora and 7 days in Israel. The deeper symbolism of matzah is that it is flat, modest, and humble. It does not have yeast. It has not risen. It has not leavened. When there's yeast in the bread, it puffs itself up. It could become conceited, haughty, prideful. And therefore, we have to remember that it's God's hand that took us out of Egypt. And therefore, we had nothing to do with it. Rather, it was totally God's redemption. The 10 plagues and the leaving of Egypt and the splitting of the sea. We had no involvement in that process. It was totally a gift from God. It was called Isarusa de Le'ela, an inspiration from above. God reached into the world and took us out of Egypt of his complete Zroa Natuya, his outstretched hand. We had no involvement in that. God reached into the womb of Egypt and extracted the Jewish people as a child coming out of the womb of its mother Egypt, so to speak. And we were redeemed by God's outstretched hand. Totally his doing, nothing to do with us. Therefore, we must show matzah-like qualities, humility. And therefore, when we show humility, when we leave Egypt, and we praise God with the Haggadah and the Hallel in the Haggadah, and on Shabbos Chol HaMoed, we say Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, the love song between us and God, between God and the Jewish people, between the Jewish people and God. God as the husband, Jewish people as the bride, the love honeymoon between God and the Jewish people as he took us out of Egypt. And therefore on Passover we eat matzah with humility. That's the example that the Gemara uses by saying that what happens when we don't have humility? We have leaven, we are leavened, we are heightened, we have gaiva, we have pridefulness, conceit, because we think that we did something, that we had a hand in our redemption, which we did not. So the quintessential example or the source of the idea of having humility is a matzah on Pesach, where God took us out of Egypt without our intervention, without our involvement. Since the basic ingredients of matzah are flour and water, when you introduced yeast into this mixture of flour and water into the dough, it rises. It rises because it appears more than it really is. All bread is flour and water with yeast added into it. Yeast makes the bread look higher than it really is. Bread is really flour and water. That's all it is. When we introduce yeast into this mixture of flour and water, the bread rises. It gives us the illusion that it is more than merely flour and water. That's what the Yetzer Hara is. The Yetzer Hara, the negative inclination, the red guy with the pitchfork, gives us an illusion. He entices us with illusion. Say, that? You never had that before. That food? You never had that before. Try it. Oh, that experience? Never had that before. The wisest man who ever lived, Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, says in Mishlei Proverbs that this refers to the negative inclination as Melech Zaken Uksil, an old and foolish king. My Rebbe, Rav Moshe Shapiro Zatzal, says the following. Why is the negative inclination referred to as an old and foolish king? Because everything that he proposes to us is old. He says it's new. Oh, this food, gotta have that. It's not kosher, but it's really good. You gotta have this. Or this relationship, it's really good. You never had this before. Or this idea, try this. It's better than what you're used to. The negative inclination on our left shoulder is called a Melech Zaken Uksil, an old and foolish king, because everything that he has with which to entice us is old. He says it's new. He tries to entice us and tell us that his old wares, the old enticements, are really new. Got to try this new thing, new and improved. Try this. You never had this before. In actual fact, everything that he has to entice us with is really an illusion. It is yeast in the dough. It's an illusion. It's a demion. Demion means imagination. He appeals to our imagination, which is not reality. He says, this, got to try this. Never had this before. But whatever he has to show us, really, we say back to him, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. Nothing you have to say is new. Everything happens to be old. But if we give in to him, he becomes a melech. He becomes melech zaken uksil. He becomes an old and foolish king. He looks wise. He says, look at this, try this. But in actual fact, we've been there before. Everything that he has to show us has already been experienced by us in a legal, positive, healthy way. And he's trying to entice us with a illusion, a puffed up illusion that it looks better than it really is. Therefore, this old and foolish king, this negative inclination, is called Seor Shebe'isa. It's called the yeast in the dough, Seor Shebe'isa, because it gives the impression that it's more than it really is. If our soul essence of self is aware that he is an illusionist, he is a magician, he tries to puff himself up and say to us that things are better than they really are, then we can see right through him and realize, what you have to sell us, I've already have. I'm going to follow this guy. I'm going to follow this side of myself. And even though it's not as exciting, it doesn't look as exciting, but really it's the truth. It's the true way. It's the emet. It's the true way to follow God's will. And therefore it's called the Seor Shebe'isa. The yeast in the dough, the Seor Shebe'isa, is an internal mechanism within ourselves to drive us to listen to the Melech Zakin Uksil, and our id and our ego try to entice us to follow the Melech Zakin Uksil. That's an internal mechanism, an internal drive, our emotions and our body, lusts and passions. At the end of the Gemara, it says the second thing which stops us from serving God is Shibud Malchios, which means subjugation to the nations, which means to secular ideas, to external ideas, to the nation's ideas of what's with it and cool. So when we use the secular influences around us, the external secular influences in society which surround us, and they influence us, if they influence us to do this and follow the negative side by indulging too much on the internet, by getting addicted to the internet, the secular society tells us that that's cool, that's with it. That's the external illusion of the Seor Shebe'isa. So the Seor Shebe'isa, that's internal, in this case, at the end of the Gemara, Shibud Malchios takes on an external persona of secular influences, of technology, of parties, of raves, of keeping up with the Joneses. And that takes us away from our values, our character, and of serving God.